What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello, and this is Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. Again, I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And we are here with world-renowned, I would say UFO expert, but that's just kind of a slight... facet of what this wonderful lady does. We have Linda Moulton Howe in studio with us. We've had her on the show a couple times before. She first phoned, then video Skyped in, and now we get to see her in the flesh. Yes. So let's give her a great big round of applause. Yay! Yes. And we're here at the 2016 Conscious Life Expo. I was down at this morning, I think it was the Ancient Aliens panel, where she received a Lifetime Achievement Award, and such well-deserved. I mean, you've been a not just a facet, but a huge block of what this genre of ancient theorists have been trying to get out to the public. And we were talking beforehand, that's why I said we need to get this on camera. But could you start with what we were talking about, how it has changed so much and how it has kind of, people kind of knocked the doors off of the closets, as we would say.
Yeah, and you have to rack back just a little bit more.
Yes,
I did my graduate work at Stanford University, and my documentaries were for the Stanford Medical Center, so I was working on hard medical issues, and my master's thesis was on with the Stanford Linear Accelerator. And believe it or not, I graduated from Stanford in '68, and that was the first time that Stanford was trying to get computers to analyze all of the particle bombardments that they were doing in the Stanford Linear Accelerator. They wanted to get the labor-intensive work off to a computer, and that was, my film was a picture calculus. So everything from Stanford, going out and working at KMBC and a street reporter and then into documentaries, it was always science, medicine, and the environment. That is my beat to this day. And it was in that, when I was director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver, Colorado, that there were headlines in the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News again, and they used the words reoccurring again, back again, cycles again. And it was about animal mutilations. And I had been born and raised in Idaho, had done my undergraduate work at the University of Colorado and then Stanford, and married, and my husband had gone for another degree at Harvard. So I had hopped from the West Coast to the East Coast, and the whole issue of animal mutilations had not touched my life at all. So it was job and profession that got us to Denver, and I am the head of a department in this TV station, and I'm doing documentaries, news, and live studio shows when these headlines about the reoccurring animal mutilations. And I said, I'm going to get to the bottom of this 36 years later. But in the most compressed way that I can tell you, it was a lot like going through Alice in Wonderland's mirror for me. Because I grew up, my personality, my school, everything was, I was pretty left brain. I loved science, I loved medicine, I loved anything that was tangible. Now I am sitting across from a sheriff in one of my very first interviews without a crew. And it was Sheriff Tex Graves up in northern Colorado, and he had showed me 266 color Polaroids that he had taken himself of mutilated animals. And that day in his 266 color Polaroid. And I counted them all because I have this thing about if you put things in chronological order, I do a lot of that on the floor to this day. Take anything that you're looking at and put it on the floor chronologically so that you can go and start getting a bird's eye view. And that's what I was doing in his office. And he was watching and I was asking him questions, and he sat down on a stool, and it was like, you've been here for several hours and you have gone through every one of my Polaroids. Let me save you some time, Linda. The perpetrators of these bloodless animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. And I can still feel that physical kind of shock that you can feel in your spine and your head when something is said to you that is, you don't have any framework. It is shocking and it has a physical impact, and that is his sentence had that night. And what unfolded from September of '79 to where we're speaking now in the middle of February, I just wanted to know, what is the truth? The animal bodies are the largest physical evidence on this planet of high strangeness, without question. And I have worked with veterinarians, I have worked with hematologists, I have worked with geneticists, I have worked with major universities on getting tissue and grass and soil from so many of these cases that I've gone basically around the world trying to investigate animals and animal mutilations. And you come up with a body of hard physical evidence, like I started at Stanford, but now it is, whether it's a horse, a cow, a rabbit, a dog, deer, elk, it's all affected, and it's affected around the planet. And the timeline did not start in 1967. The cases actually go back much further in time. So for people listening who may have two things running through their head, should they be afraid of this? Secondly, I thought it was predators, disease, or satanic cults, because that has been the mantra that the counterintel and police world were basically given, and I mean given. I have talked with people in sheriffs and veterinarian offices who said this was the demand, that we say this is predator, disease, or satanic cult. Because, as one veterinarian told me, he said, when there was a national television report in 1984, I think it was 83 or 84, and it was called the Rorvik Report, and it was supposed to be an investigated with money and somebody who had worked in the FBI, taking a lot of cases and saying they were going to do the definitive law enforcement study on animal mutilations. And it was reported not on the front page of the New York Times, it was reported in Penthouse. And Penthouse had this story by this man named Rorvik, who talked with the retired FBI guy who had done the quote-unquote definitive study. It was so laughable for any of us who actually had been doing investigations. But it shows that this is the way government matrix, behind the scenes, counterintel, when they do not want the public and the media to take anything seriously. They will make sure that whatever the subject is gets reported through something that is not credible, with some sort of a bias that is, this is the way you think. It's predator, disease, satanic cults. The chapter is closed, go away. This is counterintel from World War II to this day. They're good at it. They know how to do it. But if you come from any kind of a background where, in my case, my whole life, my whole profession, people have paid me to use my mind to be critical. So when you start saying, I don't care what newspapers or somebody has said, you say, I want to go out into the field and I want to investigate, and you come up with cooked collagen, you come up with excisions that a pathologist will say that we have no instrument that will do this because there's no carbon residue being left on these animal mutilations. You come to a biophysicist who has got soil and grass, and these are samples, and the biophysicist says, whatever happened to this ground, it had to have been microwave that quickly evaporated water molecules. I could just go on and on. So here is this huge body of evidence that I've reported about in my books, 4,000 or 5,000 radio shows, I don't know how many television shows, and now I do earthfiles.com, and there's like 165 or 175 animal mutilation reports there with photographs and with reports. So you get this body of hard physical evidence, which is where I started in school and my career, and you keep thinking, this will leverage open the truth about an alien presence on this planet that has the ability to pluck a 2,000-pound bull from a pasture in a beam of light. I'm not saying that fancifully. I have interviewed half a dozen ranchers who have seen the beams of light come down into a pasture, scaring them. Do people run up to these beams? They do not. Yeah. And they are the first to say, I saw, I watched, but I waited until the sun came up. And that person I really truly believe, because this rancher is not trying to say and make up something. Right. And then when they say the sun comes up and they're in the pasture where they saw the beam of light with either an animal rising or being lowered, can be either way, there's a mutilated animal. It fits this category. Now those are eyewitnesses. Can you get those eyewitnesses to stand up in front of a TV camera? No. To date, I've talked with a lot of people looking eye to eye, and they will say, I don't want to be on television and have my family subjected to all of the criticism and ridicule and satire that I've seen happen to other people. And you begin to realize that humans are more afraid of other humans and their ridicule and judgment than they are of extraterrestrials, and I say that quite seriously. So then you find, in my case, that life begins to divide into different tracks. I'm the reporter who's trying to go after the pressure of fact. I have all of this physical evidence that's in hard medical and physics category, and I report it, I show it, and I can't leverage up in the New York Times, the LA Times, CBS, and have talked with people in those networks, and they will say, Linda, we wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole because we don't have pockets deep enough to take on the federal government. And pretty soon, I'm in a position to say in my news and reports, this is not speculation. This is not predator disease or satanic cults. Here are the reasons why. They are hard. Anybody can reproduce. And you still can't leverage open those big headlines around the world. Part of it is that when I started in these kind of fresh eyes and going through that Alice in Wonderland mirror, I began to realize that my fellow, really all male colleagues, I have been the only woman in so much of everything in my life, that there were many who did not want the beautiful lights and the beautiful discs to be associated in any way with animal mutilation.
Because it makes a negative.
And it really came home to me one time when somebody that I knew very well, knew a researcher, and we'll just say that had a history that went back to NICAP in the original days, and said, this man is furious that you have come into this field with all of these disgusting, repulsive details about animal mutilations, and he doesn't want any of this associated with what he says is the pure light phenomena. And that was a truly valuable insight, because I've always operated that what my job is to go after the pressure of fact, not to be in political dogfights with other people because of a bias or we don't want this to be brought out or so.
Or he said, she said.
And what I began to understand is this field of trying to get to the bottom of an alien presence on this planet. Those are words that were used at the time of the JFK assassination by people we now know were totally aware that JFK was demanding from various groups in that administration for photos, film, everything that we had on the alien presence. And the implication is that he died for that effort because there was a stronger political force behind the scenes that had come to the conclusion that if not just the American population, but if the world population knew that there are extraterrestrial biological entities, that there are several types, that a lot of them don't get along, that implies conflict, but that conflict can be in sophisticated levels of mind control and manipulating time, that we are aware of technology that we retrieved as early as 1941, that we applied to the Manhattan Project and the development of the atomic bomb, and then what comes out of that is that we have to be working with neutralizing gravity, manipulating time, invisibility in military operations, all back-engineered ET technology. So now imagine you're me. I'm not working in any of the military defense. I'm a human on this planet who begins to understand the facts that we are dealing with an alien presence. It is not Homo sapien. It has the ability, a technology, to put down in pastures and bring up 2,000-pound animals and lower them back in totally bloodless, trackless. People lose sight of this. This is so important. I've seen this so many times and so many photographs. In Colorado and the West especially, and going up into Canada, in the summer months especially, the pastures can be completely dry. Whatever is grass is shriveled, and the soil is just like face powder. It's exactly like face powder. And to underscore everything that I have dealt with for the last 36 years, this case really brings it all into focus. Sheriff Graves, this was one of his cases, was walking with a deputy. They'd gotten the call. And he said as they were approaching, it was a big animal, they estimated about 1,700 pounds. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a black steer. And they could see that the ground, anything, whether it had been a person, a truck, a rabbit, or this big animal, there should be some tracks. And they couldn't see any tracks. And he said, he motioned to the deputy, let's not walk to it, let's do a circle and take photos. So they took photos of this animal with no tracks. And the animal had its head down in a hole they measure with a ruler, 8 inches. So the body is lying on the ground. The head is in a hole 8 inches deep. He said, the deputy and I, we stood there, we got closer, ear missing, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, rectum. the hooves on this animal, you can see them in the photos. I still have them. In fact, I have them in my book, An Alien Harvest and Glimpses, Volume 1. The hooves are like that. They're perfect front and back, like they've been glued together. When animals die, whether it's predator, natural, or satanic cults moving up on them, you're going to see signs of struggle everywhere. There was nothing. There wasn't a line. There wasn't a dent. It was like this big, heavy animal with its front and back hooves glued together, is what it looked like, was put down onto this ground.
I was going to ask you about that, because I was thinking that, you know, once they do their, whatever they're doing, their experiments, I mean, what do they care if they just drop it? Was there any bruising? Was there any bones broken from the actual replacing to the ground?
It's a good question, because in this case, no. This was something different. Other cases, lots of broken bones when the vet has gone in saying this animal has been dropped. This one, which is why Sheriff Graves basically said, you've got to look at this one for sure. What their conclusion was that however this was done, completely bloodlessly and no tracks, the animal was held in place, paralyzed, on the ground. And that, maybe an experiment, that the head was the only part of the body that could move. And that in the agony of what was happening, the animal dug an 8-inch hole with the head. And not one line where the legs were. Nothing else moved. Now that is eerie, that is disturbing. It brought in my mind, well, what are we dealing with? Sadists? And I can say that today in February 2016, back in September, October, November of 1979, when I was getting into this for the first time, it was at first a fear. I have never been a person who lived by fear. I've never been driven by being afraid to do things, and yet I remember feeling fear about what are we dealing with that would do this consciously and deliberately with a creature on this earth. As I went through so many cases, and I've been out in pastures literally all around this planet, I was the easiest target. Government, ETs, they could have taken me out anywhere. I did almost all my work alone. And the thought one time in a pasture in New Mexico was, I just wonder, am I being watched by all of it? And is my very existence, should I take some peace and confidence in the fact that I keep being able to go out into the world, I cut tissue, I get soil, I get grass, and nobody yet has killed me or made me disappear. And truthfully, I'm sharing that, it began to make me feel stronger. It almost made every trip that I went out to gather something for a veterinarian pathologist or something, it was like, okay, is this going to be the change? And each trip, each time, and I would get back and I can get the tissues examined and I can report, it kept giving me some kind of confidence. If the government's watching me, if ETs are watching me, and they're not taking me out, either one, then I must be doing something that they don't mind. And now we're coming all of this full circle. There was the period of people being sort of enamored and awed by lights in the sky. And then the abductions that made people upset. And I come with all these details on animal mutilations, and people did not want to hear this. This is a very difficult, repulsive subject. And then, by the time that Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, at the end of the 80s, he had the courage to step up to the plate and say something is happening here to human beings all over this planet. And as a psychiatrist with degrees at Harvard, I'm going to get into it, and did this remarkable book called Abduction. And then all of us thought, this is it. This is going to be the leverage point. He will be the Alexander who pushes this across the line. And he steps off of a curb in London at a conference where he had given his speech looking the wrong way, and a truck hit him and he died, just like that.
Wow.
But he had made inroads because of his degree and the association with Harvard, even though he was attacked by fellow colleagues. And today, I feel that it is the audiences now, that they have grown and evolved and shifted so much. Once upon a time, people were asking things like, well, do you think that the ETs want to eat us? Or is the moon really made of cheese? Which was a metaphorical joke for ETs. And it sort of began there. Beanies with gray things on them. All of that is gone. Today, at the Conscious Life Expo, by 2016, after 14 years, the dialogues that I am having with people in halls and everywhere I go are people who are really aware now of the whole more complicated issue of hybrids, rapid cycle cloning, the soul. The soul is beginning to rise as more and more from every direction that what seems so almost obvious. There is some animating force for any container, because we know that death is the absence of that force. The container is still there, but what is that force that has left that we now call it dead versus alive? It isn't the beating heart, meaning the heart is the pump that circulates the blood, but that death is the absence of the force that I'm going to use the word soul. And that we're on a planet where religions are fighting religions. Whole nations are trying to annihilate whole nations over arguments about God. When you come to this field of the lights in the sky, which now have a variety of different types of craft, a variety of different types of beings, no one that I know fully understanding which type goes with which agenda, or even which all the agendas are. But I can say this, I think, with some certainty. I was shown that briefing paper at Kirtland Air Force Base when I was working on the home box office documentary that said extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, italicized the Latin. Homo sapien goes back 2 million years to Lucy in northern Africa. Each of the models of standing up primate, up through the last two, Neanderthal or Neanderthalensis, and then we're Cro-Magnon, Homo sapien sapien. Each of those models got a little bit bigger, apparently a little bit smarter, and toward this end, the confusion, the puzzlement that relates to this whole question of the soul, is it the coin of the realm out there? Neanderthal now, in 2016, it's known that the brain capacity of Neanderthal was bigger than Cro-Magnon. It is known that their bodies, in general, were more robust than ours. they have found all kinds of pollen and seeds where they buried their dead, which meant they had a spiritual link to the passing of one of theirs, and they brought seed and flowers, like the Celts put wheat. The Celts would put wheat. There is new material that may be published in the next year or two that where we are all familiar with Lascaux and the caves in northern Spain and France, in that area along the Pyrenees. Beautiful, by anybody's definition, at any point in time. The animals in some of those caves are as beautiful as any modern artist could do and put in a museum today. They are breathtakingly wonderful.
Have you been there?
No, studied the photos in books and studied a lot about them, but I would love to get in there. Now they think that a lot of those paintings were done by the Neanderthal.
Really?
And why is this important? If the standing up primate, right before Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapien, was burying its dead, doing ritual, able to create beautiful art, that they had a bigger brain capacity. They were the life form that dominated in what we would call Europe. Why were they replaced by more violent Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapien? Is the alien presence on our planet throughout our solar system from wherever their original source is, are their agendas because they have a survival problem and they need genetic material as band-aids to try to keep whatever their whole civilization is going? And in the process, they have come to understand that they will never survive as a biological species in this universe without the animus, the animation of a vibrant, healthy, evolving soul.
Is that why they've protected us from destroying each other so many times?
Well, that it comes up in the nuclear missile issue, where many people in the abduction syndrome have said they've been shown in a hologram, and they understand there is a physics that we're completely out in the dark about, that if you split the atom in what we'll call this XYZ dimension, it will tear through an indeterminate number of other dimensions. And to underscore where we are, CERN in Geneva, the big particle bombardment that is, it has been trying to, just in the last month or two, they finally have admitted they're trying to get the energy up, and these are their words, not mine, to try to penetrate into another dimension.
Why?
This is a quote.
Why are they,
Okay, why are they wanting to try to penetrate into another dimension? Once they do that, and we've just had for the very first time ever in the history of this model of humans, a confirmation that gravity waves are being emitted by a 1.3 billion year old, they're binary black holes.
Which Einstein predicted.
100 years ago, this brilliant man, inspired by who knows, said that if you have the fabric of space-time and you have masses that are in that space-time, and he used the mattress where you put a steel ball in it and it comes down, that it will automatically, it is a consequence of the relationship of the mass to the space-time, that you will end up having an attraction force that he would call gravity, and that the gravity waves were part of his general relativity, and it took 100 years for us to confirm that there was something that would fall into the category of these gravity waves. And not only that they existed, but that the evidence would be like a bird chirping in the instruments. And they explain why. And I thought, this is like haiku. This is like poetry that we are wanting so badly to have. Is God real? Where do we come from? How did the universe begin? When will it end? How long is life guaranteed on this planet? And all underneath all of that is this whole issue of space, time, gravity, and that gravity itself has been almost like something whimsical until a chirp, like a bird, in an instrument that no one had until September of 2015. They get the instrument up. It's so sensitive. It is so sensitive that in this entire Milky Way galaxy, I'm talking about the whole galaxy, this instrument is so sensitive it could sense something the size of a soccer ball.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Wow.
We're in a whole new realm of where humans are moving with technology. And it was like they turned it on September 2015, and they made the announcement that they had the chirp of gravity waves in what would be early February of 2016. So, as one of those physicists said, and you could take everything I've been talking about in my own path since sitting with Sheriff Tex Graves back in September of '79. They have this tantalizing relationship with the universe, and they don't understand why all these things are happening. I had this tantalizing relationship with the environment around me, trying very hard to understand what is the truth about these animals. The scientists could never have known before they turned that machine on in September 2015. Impossible. So, what machine do all of us in the human family have to turn on to have the real focused truth about an alien presence that governments and power structures have been working for thousands of years to keep the mass of humanity completely in the dark about? Now we come to the part that bothers me far more than the ETs. If there have been Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapiens, fellow beings, who made a decision 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, it certainly can't go back too much further than the Göbekli Tepe time to be in the form that we are talking about now. And they make some sort of a deal. It may be for concocted immortality with technology that would keep their body containers going for 1,000,000 years. But something is bartered, and that there will be this small collaboration, human and non-human. And the non-humans may be simply trying to survive, quite literally. And that everything they do, no matter how complex and incomprehensible to us, in the end, if we knew their whole truth, it may be because they really have a survival problem. But the Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapiens that have been behind the matrix in this now famous 1% of the planet that has been controlling everything for at least 5,000 years, going back to Mesopotamia and probably what was cohabitation with the Anunnaki as pure extraterrestrials with roly-poly humans that have been brought into existence through that DNA manipulation. And the idea that there would be a collaboration to keep the evolving human family dumb, blind, deaf, and focused on what we would call sort of the detritus of living on the planet instead of what is our soul? What is the relationship of our soul to our body container? If it is true at the moment of death that the soul goes and recycles. One military guy communicated with me after he had spent 3 years with an extraterrestrial biological entity at Los Alamos lab. And it was, the being died for unknown causes on June 18, 1952. And this is now so reported and repeated from documents to other people that what I'm telling you is, as far as I know, date, location, absolutely true, and this was the Eben type. And this man, who was a U.S. Air Force captain and retired and then died as a U.S. Air Force colonel in the late 80s, but was able to communicate to me, he said that there were two things that this Eben communicated. It was always telepathic, that he thought was so important. The first one was from the Eben: we made you, we put you here, but you have to live it. Like CD-ROMs, what are we? What are we? And the second, this is coming right from this man, reincarnation, the recycling of souls, is the machinery of this universe. Now, if the non-humans, if their focus is the relationship between the animating soul and the container body, what is it that they know that we don't know? And why is it that we are in an age where there is a Kardashian layer that is the opposite of what we are talking about, and yet at the same time, the millennial generation of the 0 to 25-year-olds are largely rejecting this in polls all over the planet. So you've got something that is coming like this in generations, but is the millennial generation and the children that the millennial generation is going to have, are they actually Cro-Magnon Homo sapien sapien?
Wow.
And this is why right now, going forward in 2016 and on, you're going to hear more and more about hybrids. There is Barbara Lamb's new book, Meet the Hybrids. There are all kinds of people who are coming to me and saying, for the first time in my life, I feel like I could talk with somebody like you about, and then it's just a cascade of high strangeness. And in me, I don't feel any fear. I almost feel that this is inevitable. If this planet, over the last 35,000 to 2 million years, went through 20 or 30 different models, and somehow it's outside of our control currently, but there is, I do not think that you can point to any evidence on the planet that the Ebens, the blondes, are showing any destruction of human beings. If there were a whole lot of people being found dead in whatever condition, as there are in the animals, it continues around the world, we would have known long ago. I just don't think that you could have masses of people being killed and mutilated. I think a distinction is made, and it says something to me why I'm still alive, and that the alien presence, that is not their goal. It's not wholesale physical violent elimination, but they may be working at a genetic level. Now, David Paulides, who is here at this conference and is speaking, he has a tremendous amount of information about the numbers of missing people on planet Earth. The missing people. How do we ever prove an absence We have no idea until if people came back. Missing people, missing children, missing animals. They're missing, we don't know, so it's a big, huge cipher. I think that he feels in some of the cases that we're dealing with the alien presence, and this would be a facet of the interaction, that they would be taking people and not returning them. Okay, now, instead of assuming that those people have been destroyed, let's assume they're taken to another planet or on something. And that as we keep going forward, that more and more people are going to be able to have these discussions we're having now, where you don't necessarily have to feel fear. But we need to be curious about what has happened to all the missing people, why the animal mutilations continue unabated in both hemispheres. There does not appear to be any covert or any direct violence on humanity outside of humans to humans, and that the level of violence on the planet seems to be going up. And,
Definitely.
and why, and if we understood all the pieces, would the increased violence on Earth among humans now be because there are competing non-humans for some sort of geopolitical territorial gain, and they are in conflict, and they have their human representatives in the human family, and that the wars themselves could be like a chess game being played out among different competing alien presences. What I'm describing to you now is where I would say that some of us who have been struggling with this for a long time, we have those discussions. Could humans themselves end up being like surrogate players in a chess game for big geopolitical territorial conflicting forces? Even when you get to that level, which is a lot of private discussions, you always come back, if it is true that the machinery of the universe is the recycling of souls, and another man said, we have been told by the Ebens, there are many more body containers than souls in this universe, then how complex is this matrix? Who has the vested interest to make this type of container for how many souls to go in and out to reach an understanding about the dimension that Cro-Magnon Homo sapien sapien goes at the moment of death, which is what abductees have said for years. Raising the entire ante on how big and complex all this is, and if, in the end, it could be proved that the Ebens have been here for 270 million years, which is one of the government statements. If they created all of the dinosaurs, which has come in many, many sources, the dinosaurs go back to about 235 to 240 million years ago. So that means there would have been some sort of an alien presence or presences on this planet without any standing up primate consciousness or observation from 270 down to 235 or 40 million. Whatever was going on in that phase, the government says they have some proof. But then the dinosaurs emerge. And they are on this planet from around 235, 240 million years ago until the asteroid 65 million. So it's about 85 million years. 85 million of dinosaurs dominating the surface of the Earth. Sometimes when I try to grasp that, that's one of the strangest concepts beyond anything. And then, and this is a discussion I actually had with a man who retired from the Defense Intelligence Agency in 1999, and long, complex to put together a meeting. He wanted to talk about a lot of things that are in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, because he had been exposed to them, compartmentalized in his 23 years in the DIA. And he said, but Linda, we are so compartmentalized that the little piece that I know, and Joe Smith knows this little piece, and we open up your book, and you have 100 pages with illustrations and maps and people talking about what we thought was the most confidential thing that the government had. And he said, you know, I had to talk with you. And he said that in this whole issue of he said there are three competing geopolitical, territorial, conflicting intelligences that have been here for these 270 million years. Three rings of competing interests. And he said the thing we're not really clear about. 65 million years ago, we know that some big rock from outer space hit in the Gulf of Mexico, and we call it the Chicxulub crater. And it's now accepted, because of the iridium, the amount of iridium that can only come from outer space. This must explain, or it has been the only so-called acceptable academic explanation for the wipe out of the dinosaurs. And he said, but you know, we understand how sophisticated and advanced these evens are. And he said, Linda, they can do anything. They can move time. They can move through black holes. They move point to point in this universe. He's giving me all this list. And he said, you know, my team in the DIA, we know what's been accepted. But he said, we have to keep coming back to, they had the ability to move that asteroid into another timeline, into another dimension, or simply to evaporate it. And he said, why didn't they?
That's a great question.
And what came out of that huge impact? The complete annihilation of the dinosaurs on planet Earth and the immediate and rapid rise of mammals.
Wow.
And eventually
That, honestly,
that's a cliffhanger.
I was going to say, speaking of time, we're out of time, and I cannot, again, every time we have her on, we lose track of time, and time goes very fast, and we have to say, Linda here at the Conscious Life Expo 2016 just received a Lifetime Achievement Award. She's going to be speaking tomorrow at noon, is that right?
We're doing a panel, UFO panel at noon, and then at 4 I do a 90-minute workshop, which is going behind the scenes of what we've talked about today. I think it's an important one. And then the next day is another panel, and then I do a 2-hour intensive on Monday on Bentwaters and a lot of new breakthroughs.
Oh, I can't
then
wait.
we can find you at earthfiles.com. And
at earthfiles.com. Everybody just think of a person who files reports about the Earth, and so it's Earth Files.
Awesome. And your books are An Alien Harvest, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1 and 2, and also Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, which was updated and expanded in 2001.
It's right. And the brand new edition of An Alien Harvest came out a few months ago, and it is expanded. It's a 480-page book now, and it has color from beginning to end. And somebody
and pictures,
said,
right? We have to
they
have
said,
pictures.
I was afraid to open up the book because this is your investigation of animal mutilations, and it was a guy, and he said, there's no blood.
Right.
There are no tracks.
Yeah.
These are the neatest scenes. And that's the point.
Well, we are honored. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time out of I know busy schedule to be with Eddie and I. So, and you're hopefully always invitation is open.
Thank you.
All right.
I
Thank
love you guys.